Hey everyone, Brown at I've Brown here, and tonight we're going to be talking about the movie Dollman on Blu-ray. So Dollman came out in 1991, and it was directed by Albert Pyun. And if you know the name and you've seen some of his movies, or you've watched a couple of my reviews, you know that Albert Pyun is definitely no stranger to B movies, which is kind of a good thing because Dollman is a B movie through and through, and I mean that in a good way and a bad way. So first, a bit of a backstory here. Dollman was one of many movies that came out of the production company Full Moon Features, which was masterminded by a guy named Charles Band, who himself was no stranger to the B movie scene. And Charles Band actually goes all the way back to the 80s, in which he was one of the movers and shakers of a production company called Empire Pictures. In fact, he was probably its figurehead. And so Empire Pictures was in some ways kind of like the Cannon group, Golden Globus, in a sense that it predominantly turned out movies that could arguably called schlock or exploitation, but every now and then it would have its share of legitimate successes. Granted, this was strictly within the B movie scene in the case of Empire Pictures, though, but nonetheless, movies like, say, Reanimator, Trancers, From Beyond, Dolls, Zone Troopers, Prison, which was one of director Renny Harlin's first movies, and to this day is one of my favorites by him. While Empire was strictly in the B movie scene, you can't deny that it had its share of successes, and even putting aside its legitimately good movies, odds are you've seen movies like, say, Eliminators, Dungeon Master, Ghoulies, Troll, all sorts of crazy movies. Terror Vision, I mean, that's another one. But yeah, so, I mean, at the very least, I mean, it's a company that if you were in the B movie scene, you were more than likely familiar with. And the same applies to Full Moon Features. And so, fast forward to their early 90s, after the collapse of Empire Pictures, Charles Band and others, put together Full Moon Features to sort of, continue, trying to, become the next Roger Corman, which was kind of his goal. And Roger Corman, for those who don't know, is kind of the king of producing B movies. Look him up sometime. Very fascinating, stories come about from this guy, and a lot of people got their starts working with him. And the same kind of applies to Charles Band too, in the sense that a lot of actors kind of who went on to have some good careers got their starts working if not specifically with him, then at least his companies. But anyway, though, Full Moon Features sort of had the advantage of having a corner on the home video market, and it sort of had like almost a mini empire, if you will, in the sense that went to a place like Blockbuster or something like that, you'd find shelves full of Full Moon movies on VHS, and that's kind of how their distribution went. I mean, some of the movies were released theatrically, but a lot of them were released strictly or straight to video, if you will, and back in the days of VHS. And I regret to say that a lot of these movies I saw, years after they came out, like, say, when they're available on DVD or in this case Blu-ray. I wish I could have, been back to where, I could have experienced watching it on VHS, because, you get the whole experience that way, and you can actually say, hey, I was there when it came out on VHS, that kind of thing. But no such luck. But, at the very least, we can catch up on, old school movies on, DVD and Blu-ray. But Dollman is one of those, I'm not going to say it's like lightning in a bottle, because that implies that it's actually a good movie. It's more like it's sort of a gathering of unlikely elements, that all sort of amassed in one place, and would either, seldom get together again, or never get together again. But this is the one movie I can think of wherein you have Jack Death from Trancers, aka Tim Thomerson, and Rorschach from Watchmen, aka Jackie Earle Haley, together in the same movie. I mean, that's not something you could say, with most other movies. And, also you have both Charles Band and Albert Pyun, working on the same movie. And Charles Band, I mean, since Full Moon Features was his, company, he had a lot to do with, working on production and what have you. But he also came up with the story, not the screenplay, but the story, the concept of the movie. And Albert Pyun, the guy, behind movies like, Sword and the Sorcerer, Dangerously Close, Cyborg, and, well, the early 90s version of Captain America. Not the one with Chris Evans, totally different thing. So basically, you have, a B-movie director working with a, sort of B-movie maestro when it comes to production. And, you have, while it's not a good movie, it's definitely a unique movie. So the story of Dollman, it starts off on this planet, way in outer space, and where the aliens, or the citizens on this planet, obviously they're aliens, all, look human. There's, just, your dash of alien-looking architecture here and there, but, I mean, it may as well be, a sort of, it looks like a futuristic version of Earth on a low budget, but it's another planet. And everyone, even though they look human, they're aliens. But the main character, his name is Brick Bardo, and he's a police officer on this planet, sort of like the alien equivalent of Dirty Harry if Tim Thomerson were playing him. And so, which is basically what you get with Brick Bardo. Tim Thomerson as Dirty Harry as an alien who looks very human. Anyway, though, he's a cowboy cop who's constantly butting heads with his superiors, and nonetheless, I mean, he tends to get the job done when it comes to, say, shootouts and hostage situations. But unfortunately, for, say, PR with, say, like, the mayor of the city or something like that, there's oftentimes a high body count involved, but usually, against the criminals, not the civilians that are, say, caught in the line of fire. He's got the mayor breathing down his neck, so, I mean, definitely shades of Dirty Harry right there. I mean, cowboy cop who is able to, kick ass and take names, but he's got, his superiors, saying, bah, 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 and take, breathing down his neck and what have you. But he also has an old enemy, a guy by the name of Sprug, who, at one point in time was a, humanoid individual, but due to multiple encounters with Brick, he's now been reduced to a floating head, because Brick Bardo, in every encounter he's had with the guy, has blown off one limb of his at a time in every encounter. You think that the guy would kind of take the hint, it's like, hey, maybe I need to back off on, going after Bardo, but turns out, that the two of them have like this, rivalry and mutual, hatred for one another. And Sprug, even though he's been reduced to a floating head, still has a bit of a criminal empire on, the homeworld of Brick Bardo. And so one day, he and his goons managed to capture Brick Bardo. And, he's, pulling a classic, Bond villain mistake in the sense that he's gloating about his master plan, to the hero, even though, the hero, isn't tied up in any way. And so his master plan is, basically he's got this dimensional fusion bomb, I think is what it was called, which, basically can, suck the atoms of, the city they're in and throw them into another universe. And, basically you just, for all intents and purposes, destroy the city, or at the very least rearrange it in such a way to where it'll be, very, twisted and chaotic for, everyone living in the city. But Bardo, who has more than a few tricks up his sleeve, manages to outfight, his henchman, Sprug's henchman. And while Sprug beats a hasty retreat in his spaceship, Bardo ends up going after him in his own spaceship. And so, he's going after Sprug, through outer space, and the two of them, end up going through some sort of random, energy belt that basically throws both of their ships, several, light years away, and it also affects both of them in a sense that it shrinks their ships, and so both Sprug and Bardo end up on planet Earth, and specifically the Bronx. And this is where things take a turn for this the different, in the sense that you've got Brick Bardo in the Bronx, who unfortunately, due to having gone through that strange radiation belt, is reduced from, say, normal human size to 13 inches tall. And so, and the same thing for Sprug. So it's funny because like their ships are literally, once they're on Earth, they look like toys. And, Sprug and Bardo, they look like, miniature, action figures almost. But Bardo is actually taken in by a woman named Debi, who sort of, she's sort of one of the leaders of the neighborhood watch in this sort of war-torn area of the city. And she's a single mom, trying to raise her kid and keep her kid safe in a war zone, and so. Because gangs and basically have free reign of the city, and the authorities don't really do jack about it. You got the mayor who comes in and makes like these empty speeches and promises, and gets his quote unquote sound bites for the cameras, but he doesn't really do jack when it comes to, say, actually trying to help the people living in this war zone. And so Debi, once she and her son, get a hold of Brick Bardo and his spaceship, they actually, have something of a unique opportunity here, because, you got Brick Bardo, who has a really powerful handgun that on his world, basically blows his enemies to smithereens with one or two shots. But because, he's been shrunken down to size, well, that gun can still do some damage, but it's more like, a couple of lingering wounds, as opposed to, say, instantly blowing someone apart. But, Debi, she sees that, Bardo, has his firepower on him, and, is trying to, persuade him to try and, go up against the gangs, even though he's only, like, that tall. And Bardo, he's just wanting to, try and fix his ship and, get back to his home planet, but not before going after Sprug, because he knows that fusion dimensional bomb that Sprug's carrying is no joke. And speaking of Sprug, he ends up in the Bronx as well, but in the neighborhood of a gang run by a guy named Braxton Red, played by a young Jackie Earle Haley. And Braxton Red is, sort of not the king of the whole neighborhood, but he's definitely the leader of the most prominent gang in the area. And so it turns out that Braxton and Debi have a history with one another. And Braxton's basically kind of gone out of his way to make sure that his crew don't harm Debi or her kid. But on the other hand, he has every intention of being king of the city, as far as, gangs go. But once he comes across Sprug, he nearly kills Sprug, on sight, because he sees just a floating head. And he's like, why should I, listen to anything you have to say? And so Sprug, basically makes a deal with him, saying that, hey, I have this bomb that if you got a hold of it, we could rule the city through sheer terror, because he's telling Braxton, what the bomb will do if it's, detonated. And so he's like, okay, let's see what we can do for each other. And so, basically you got, Dollman, or Brick Bardo, who becomes known as the Dollman because of his, small size, who actually manages to, say, turn the tables on the gang, through, surprise, because obviously they don't expect to be, going up against, law enforcement officer who's like this small, who nonetheless still packs a punch with his weaponry. But you also have, Brick Bardo bonding with Debi and her son, and actually starting to, care for the people in the neighborhood. And so when it comes time for, say, Braxton and Sprug to, make their attempt at going after Dollman, basically Dollman has something to fight for besides empty vengeance. Well, maybe not empty vengeance, but this is more than just, ending Sprug once and for all. This is, hey, I've got people, to defend here. And so this was a very, as far as B movies go, it walks the line between, being, a bad movie and a halfway decent one. Because, okay, so just to get it out of the way, the special effects in this movie, unfortunately, suck big time. I mean, even for a low-budget movie or production company, with all the resources and talent involved, you would expect the special effects to be, better than, they are on screen. But unfortunately, let's just put it this way. I mean, other reviewers have pointed out that, certain special effects, like, say, camera techniques or stop motion and what have you, say back in the 50s and 60s, kind of look better than the special effects in this movie, which is from the early 90s. I mean, you've got a problem. That being said, though, one of the things that, the movie did rather well in segments was the fact that it operated within the realm of dark comedy, more or less, say, at the beginning of the movie. But then once Brick Bardo ends up getting away from his world and crash landing on ours, that's when you get into, say, some harsh reality, albeit with, a 13-inch law enforcement officer, running around, in the Bronx, and a bad guy who's a floating head. But the thing is, it's like, the dark comedy at the beginning of the movie more or less centers on Tim Thomerson doing a killer Dirty Harry impression, who that would do Clint Eastwood proud. Basically, playing up the whole cowboy cop angle and doing a really good job with it. And so, excuse me. I mean, you get this, you get this, twisted yet hilarious moment where there's a hostage situation. And in a laundromat where the hostage taker, basically he surrounds himself with all these women who happen to be, well, plump, if you will. But he's basically got this rope, to where it's like they're all tied up, together, and they're forming kind of a living, circle around him. And so basically, none of the police outside can take a shot. And so Brick Bardo, he decides, hey, you know what? I'm just going to go in and I'm going to do my laundry. And everyone's like, wait, what? And he's like, no, this is where I do my laundry. And so he goes in there and he starts to do his laundry. And, everyone in there, the hostages and the hostage taker, are all like, what the heck is going on here? And then eventually Brick Bardo ends up talking to the hostage taker and pointing out that his gun is more or less, it's kind of like the sci-fi equivalent of, Dirty Harry's, I know what you're thinking, punk. Did you get off 6 shots or 5? Speech from Dirty Harry. And so it's like the alien equivalent of the 44 Magnum. And so, he's saying, oh, I know I'm not going to be able to hit you, but I'll hit her, and then it'll go through you, and it'll go through the other fat woman. And so, what ends up happening is one of the women, gets so scared that they end up having a heart attack. And so she falls down, and then everyone falls down. And since the bad guy's right in the middle, he gets smushed. I mean, he doesn't get killed, but it's more like, yeah, he's going to be in the hospital for a while. So, I mean, the film has a very dark sense of humor. And it's just one of those things where it's like, if they tried to do something like that today, nowadays in a mainstream movie, it'd probably be canceled or something like that for fat shaming. I mean, I'm not trying to, like, say anything against, like, I'm not trying to say be anti-fat or anything. It's just I'm trying to make a point that this movie has a dark sense of humor that, it works on the B movie scene, but probably wouldn't work in the mainstream scene. But anyway, though, so you have little things like that. And I also thought it was interesting how, the glimpse we got of, say, how the media was run on the world where Brick comes from. Because it kind of mirrors, things you've seen in other movies, wherein, like, say, for instance, you'll have a police officer who's, doing the job that, the authorities, are reluctant to do, but instead of, say, the media congratulating him or, say, trying to, point out, the decrease in crime, well, they have their own agenda, and so they try and spin it to where, Brick Bardo's a bigger threat than, say, the bad guys he goes after. And granted, he is a cowboy cop, but you can't deny he gets results. And so, but because it's an election year, the mayor wants him to basically not do anything and just let the criminals run roughshod. So it definitely, has, sort of nods to, other movies like that, in the non-sci-fi vein. But since this is, low-budget sci-fi, it's, humanoid aliens on a different world, but, same shit, different day. So I thought that was interesting to see. And also, another bit where the dark comedy comes into play. When I say that his gun is the equivalent of, the 44 Magnum, I'm not joking. Like, one or two shots from this thing, on his world against someone his size blows, the person to smithereens, okay? I mean, it's not quite RoboCop gory, but at the same time, for a B movie, it's kind of like, damn, but, and so then we go from the dark comedy of, the beginning of the movie, and then once we get into Earth and the Bronx, the movie, that's when it sort of takes a more serious tone. I mean, it never loses its, odd bit of comedy here and there, but it shows how harsh life is in the city, and because, I mean, it goes from a point where, there's all these montages of, damaged buildings, and gangs running amok, and then at one point you see some gang members, go into a convenience store, and, I mean, they take the money and everything, but then they just shoot the guy. And, it's just so, they're so nonchalant about it. And so it's kind of like, oh my God, this got dark rather quickly. and so I thought that was, whether you think it's a nice touch, I mean, that's going to be up to you. But I thought that it definitely, made you sit up and take notice, because it goes from, I shouldn't be laughing, but this is hilarious, to, oh my God, that's, yeah, shit like that happens on a daily basis. I mean, this is kind of close to home, And granted, this was in 1991, but still, I mean, you get the idea. I mean, it feels a lot more real once it gets to Earth. And so then you have Brick Bardo's interactions with, Debi and her kid, as well as, other people in the neighborhood who are constantly wanting to see the Dollman. And so it's like, he's in his ship at one point, trying to sleep, and then he wakes up because, the ship starts shaking, and it's because Debi's kid is, showing the ship and the Dollman to all his friends. And so you got all these little kids peering in at the cockpit, and, Tim Thomerson, he's just like, you gotta be kidding me, that kind of thing. So you got little funny bits like that to sort of balance out the darkness. But yeah, Tim Thomerson actually does a very good job in this part. He kind of made, this is sort of his bread and butter. And when it comes to, say, parodying, tough guy detective types, I mean, that's one of the things that, he excelled at in the movie Trancers, which, I mean, Trancers was in turn a ripoff of Blade Runner and the Terminator that was a legitimately cool B movie. And his part as Jack Death in that movie is definitely iconic within the realm of B movies. And then here, it's like he's parodying, his own role of Jack Death with a mix of Dirty Harry. It's more Dirty Harry than Jack Death, but Jack Death is in there. But Tim Thomerson just does a really good job with it because, on one hand, he does really good with the comedy, but he's a good enough actor to where when the more serious parts come into play, there's a sense of pathos that he's able to, generate for his character. And I especially thought that there was a rather, moving scene where he and Debi have a talk with one another, and she's got she told her kid to hey, leave him alone, leave the Dollman alone, and so she takes his ship with him in it into her room just to kind of help him get some peace and quiet, and thankfully he speaks her language, and so the two of them actually get to talk with one another. And mind you, I mean, she's a giant, okay, but to him, like, she's a giant, he's just this small, but they have this sort of heartfelt two-way conversation in which they both share their backstories, and how their lives have been affected by crime. Like in Brick's case, I mean, the reason he's so dead set on going after Sprug is because Sprug had some of his goons kill Bardo's wife when he arrested him one too many times. And so after that, that's when Bardo went all cowboy cop on the guy, to a point where anytime he turned up, he'd lose a body part to Brick Bardo. And so that's why he's just got such a mad on for him. And so then Debi, she tells Brick that she actually used to run with a gang member, and he was actually the father of her son, but he ended up getting killed in a stick-up gone wrong. And so that was kind of like a dose of cold reality for her, and that's when she realized that I can't be in this life anymore. I have a son. I have to raise him right. I have to fight for this neighborhood. I have to turn things around. And so it took the death of her boyfriend and her kid's father to turn things around to where she became kind of like the figurehead of this movement to fight crime in the neighborhood, kind of like Neighborhood Watch, or something like that. And it's very telling that in the scenes where the Neighborhood Watch is having a meeting with the mayor, I mean, there's a definite sense of, say, you can relate to what's going on, because you got the politician who's blandly making promises and saying all sorts of sound bites, but she's the one saying, well, what are you going to do about this and this and this and this? I mean, those are nice words, but what are you going to do about the shit that's actually going down? And the acting in that particular scene, I thought, was surprisingly well done, especially for a very low-budget B movie like this one. But it's like, if you've been in a Crime Watch meeting, I mean, you can definitely relate to that. And the actress who played Debi, Kamela Lopez, I'm not sure if I've seen her in anything else. I know she's been in a lot of other things, but as far as like movies that I can think of off the top of my head, I mean, this is the only thing that comes to mind. But I mean, she was actually very good in this movie, to the point where it's like her story, like in some ways, I felt was more interesting than Brick Bardo's. I mean, Brick Bardo's was entertaining, to be sure. I mean, because this is a B movie, sort of a low budget sci-fi B movie. But at the same time, the relevance and the harsh reality that sort of comes into play when she's on the scene. I mean, it works, and the writing, the screenplay was by a guy named Chris Roghair, and he actually manages to, I mean, I'm not going to say the script makes the movie good, but it makes the movie stand out more than you would expect. I mean, like, of course, you got the, zany bits with the dark comedy and what have you, but at the same time, you don't really expect, the seriousness of it to, hit home like it does, if that makes sense. But, anyway, though, so I like those bits about the movie. And of course, I mean, you have, you're inevitably going to have, certain innuendo when it comes to, say, anytime Dollman being 13 inches is brought up. I mean, like there's a point where Debi's telling her friends like I we've got the answer to the gang problem. He's at my house. He's there's a 13-inch man at my house. And she's trying to say, he's 13 inches tall, but one of her lady friends is like, ooh, I wish I had a 13-inch man. So you get stuff like that, but also another person who really stood out in this movie was a young Jackie Earle Haley as the gang leader, Braxton Red. And one of the things I really liked about his character is that, I mean, I mentioned a bit ago that the screenplay makes it clear that he and Debi have a history with one another. So you see him in scenes where he's being a bad guy, and he's definitely a bad guy. But then there'll be moments where even when he's got his whole gang at Debi's place trying to find the Dollman, he's going out of his way to make sure that none of the gang members go after her kid. I mean, even though they're going through her apartment, he's basically like, hey, don't mess with her. Look through the place, don't mess with her. That kind of vibe. But I liked. He's a good enough actor, and he and Kamela Lopez actually have a pretty good chemistry with one another. To where, I mean, you could tell that. I mean, like even in the moments where Debi is telling him to get the hell out of her place and leave her and her son alone. I mean, there'll be moments also where that past relationship will come up, and she'll try and remind him that that it doesn't have to be like this, that kind of thing. But at the same time, he's just so immersed in the world of crime that he doesn't see a way out. And it's like the only way in his eyes to stay alive is to be number one. And basically he's already in charge of the toughest gang in the neighborhood. And basically you find out that while he's wanting to power for himself, in a twisted way, he's also doing it to look out for her and her kid. And so I thought that was a really interesting dynamic between the two. And apparently according, I think it was like on IMDb or something, or some other website that was talking about the movie. Apparently, Jackie Earle Haley and Kamala Lopez, I mean, behind the scenes, they kind of had a thing going. So that chemistry makes some sense, and also, I liked how, I mean, as ridiculous as the movie was, and when it came to, say, like the special effects and what have you, whenever he's interacting with Sprug, who, I mean, is, clearly, I mean, he's a miniature floating head, but he's clearly shot in such a way to where it's like, you don't really see the two match up on screen together, that kind of thing. Or at the very least, if they do end up on screen together, something feels off, but he's a good enough actor to where he actually makes it believable that he's talking to a floating head that's like yay small. And he actually has a certain amount of intelligence, at his, hand, because when he finds out what kind of power that Sprug has at his disposal, as in that fusion bomb, he basically sees it an opportunity to not only keep all the other gangs out of his way, but to also maybe use it to go after the authorities as well. And so he has his own agenda there. And granted, you could probably see that one coming, but at the same time, I liked how he was a guy who, I mean, from a criminal standpoint, had his own ambitions and goals, but he definitely wasn't without some sense of humanity. I mean, yet it's tough to find, but in the moments that the humanity comes out, especially with Debi, I mean, Jackie Earle Haley definitely makes Braxton into a far more memorable villain than you'd expect for this kind of movie. But at the same time, he's definitely having fun with the part. And so, I mean, it's funny seeing him berate certain gang members of his. Basically these hardcore gangbangers, and yet, here he is, smacking him around and what have you, like, or pimp slapping him, if you will. And it's kind of funny to see, or he's, cussing him out and what have you. So yeah, I mean, all three of the leads definitely do a good job in the part. But I think, the thing that keeps the movie from being, the good within the realm of B movies, good that it could have been, is, like I said, the special effects. Because, I mean, they really do not look good. They didn't look good then. They don't look good now, especially now. And you would think that with the Blu-ray, they could have spruced things up a bit, but unfortunately they don't. It's very grainy. The film quality is very grainy, and so the special effects suffer even more. But, I mean, I did like how, as far as his gun goes, he has this, Brick Bardo has this, sort of, circle on his hand, to where basically if his gun's knocked away from him, he can sort of wave his hand about, and the circle lights up, and the gun comes flying to him, and then bam, I mean, that was actually kind of cool. But at the same time, special effects wise, it's like just a quick flash of light, and then poof, there it is. But at the same time, like, there were moments where, say for instance, there are cockroaches that are in Debi's apartment, and Brick sees them, freaks out, and takes a pot shot at them. I mean, the special effects for that, I mean, if they'd had a little bit more of a budget, or if the camera work had been better, that could have been a cool scene. But instead, it's just like, that just looks really cheesy, that kind of thing. And also, I'm not sure what the terminology is, but when it comes to, say, the camera work, like, or the way the miniature stuff is done, it's like, you can definitely see, that, Brick is, say, on one set, and the humans, like the quote unquote giants, the everyone else is on a different set, but they're trying to splice it together to where it looks like they're in the same place, but it just doesn't look right. And so when it got to that scene where Debi and Brick are having that heart-to-heart, I mean, it's a good scene, and it's very well acted. And it's definitely kind of a breather moment that the movie needed. But unfortunately, that scene is marred by that, problem with the camera work, and or the, the way they tried to splice it and what have you. So moments like that, unfortunately, do kind of detract from the movie. I mean, what you're getting into if you're seeing this movie. I mean, considering it's directed by, a guy who specializes in B movies, and it's produced, or it's one of the many, products from a guy who produces B movies. And so it's definitely a B movie. You know what you're getting into, more than likely. But even then, though, it is a letdown when the special effects suck as much as they do. And also, the character of Sprug, while there are moments of comedy that work with his character, they're mostly in the sense of, his interplay with Brick Bardo. Like, anytime, Brick Bardo's taunting him about, having, blown off, his arm last time or something like that. I mean, you get moments like that are funny, but there really wasn't much sense of development with his character. Like, there's a feud going on, and then when you find out, what he had his goons do to Brick Bardo's wife, I mean, you definitely understand why Bardo has such a mad on for this guy. But at the same time, whenever he's on screen, I mean, he's literally just a floating head. And, I mean, I could have looked past that and everything, as far as the shitty special effects go. But unfortunately, that, hatred that the two of them share, I feel like it would have helped the movie if, say, Sprug had maybe a little bit more screen time, or you saw, him stewing his own juices, as it were, psychologically speaking. I mean, I know this is just a cheesy B movie, but at the same time, I really feel like that would have, helped us, care about, the conflict between Brick Bardo and Sprug. But, thankfully, Jackie Earle Haley, basically comes in and steals the show, and, Sprug is, well, swept under the rug in a way or two. So, while Sprug was unfortunately a disappointment, I mean, a few moments of comedy aside, I mean, Jackie Earle Haley, definitely did the lion's share of, lifting when it came to, say, the villains and the bad guys in this movie. And Tim Thomerson, ironically, does the lion's share of lifting when it comes to the acting as well. I mean, considering he's playing a guy who's like that small, But then again, he also has Kamela Lopez, to play off of, and she does a very good job in, her part. And so, even though the movie looks shitty, you kind of get invested in, say, the lead characters and their arcs. That being said, though, I think one of the shortcomings of the movie is that it's like you have these individual scenes, or at the very least segments of the movie that work very well. Like I was saying, when I was talking about the beginning of the movie with the dark comedy, in this quote unquote alien planet, where Brick is a cop. I mean, you have that. I mean, that's a very good segment that works very well in terms of dark comedy. And then of course you have the bit of when Brick and Sprug land in the Bronx, and you have that dose of, oh, welcome to the Bronx. Oh my God, this is like right outside my door. This is hell. That kind of thing. I mean, not me literally, but just it feels close to home in an urban sense. So those individual segments work very well, but then it's like when they're sort of trying to combine the two elements together, I mean, there's some measure of success, but there's a very awkward feeling though, because they don't seem to know exactly what they want to be. I mean, as far as the people who made the movie goes, because I mean, you have moments that work very well when it comes to, say, cheesy sci-fi dark comedy, but then you also have, the moments of drama that surprisingly hit home. But then when they try and blend the two together, it just feels very awkward. I mean, to a point of, say, I mean, it's cool to see, Rick, going, taking out the bad guys, in his pint-sized state. But at the same time, though, when you see how cheesy the special effects are, like when we see, like what's clearly, say, like at some point, like literally just a doll, being, sort of moved around the room to make it look like Tim Thomerson's, taking out these guys, in his pint-sized state. I mean, you have stuff like that ends up happening, and, coming off the heels of, getting drawn up into a serious story, and it just sort of takes you out of it, I guess. So, I mean, thankfully, though, because you actually are kind of invested in the character of, Brick Bardo and Debi, as well as Braxton, I mean, you can kind of look past the limitations and enjoy the movie for what it is. But unfortunately, because of those limitations, the movie isn't quite as good as it could have been. Like, it's not as bad as it could have been, because, like I said, the special effects, they suck. But, because, you actually get invested in, the lead characters of the movie, you kind of give a shit about what's going on. But the other thing is, this movie has a very short runtime. And, it kind of made me think of the movie Trancers as well, because, I mean, they borrow a lot from Trancers in some ways, but both movies have very short run times. Whereas Trancers, though, the runtime actually worked for that particular movie. Whereas here, though, it suffers in the sense that it has, plot elements that are intriguing or, well done in some ways. But unfortunately, because of how rushed everything is, we don't really get enough in the way of exposition in certain areas. I mean, we get enough to, say, feel for, Debi and her plight, as well as, seeing that, Brick Bardo has a sense of pathos to him, courtesy of Tim Thomerson's, acting. But at the same time, because we don't get enough we don't get to see enough of, say, Brick Bardo's home life on his own home planet. We don't really, we're getting a glimpse of, him in action on his home planet, but that's it. It would have been cool if, say, we'd gotten to see like maybe a montage of him in action, in working other cases, or maybe just his interactions, in the police department or something like that before, say, the mayor kicked him off the force. But instead, it just goes from one thing to another, boom, 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 just like that. So, and then the movie just ends. And I remember there was another website, I think it was Moria, it was a sci-fi fantasy horror review site. When they were talking about this movie, they made that point as well, that when it comes to the ending of the movie, it's very abrupt. And, you see it, if you see it, you know what I'm talking about. But it's like, there's this big deal made about this, dimensional fusion bomb. And so you're thinking there's finally going to be some high stakes being played for. And to be sure, I mean, there are bits and pieces that are well done in the climax. I mean, not with the special effects, but more along the lines of, say, the acting of certain characters. But then it's like the bomb ends up going off, and as much as it's been built up, to be as much of a cosmic threat as it is, I mean, it's just like a bunch of low budget, streams of light and sparks, and then poof, it's gone. And then it turns out, oh, it just burned itself out, that kind of thing. I know, some kind of a spoiler, but yeah, so it just, I felt kind of cheated as far as that goes, because, I mean, they could have done a lot with that as far as, Braxton, being able to, wield that, because he definitely had more intelligence than you'd expect for, someone who, was in his situation as, the leader of a gang, but at the same time, what they ultimately end up doing with it, it's kind of a letdown. And so, yeah, it's not a waste of time, in my opinion. Like, if you, let me put it this way, if you don't like B movies, you're probably not going to like this one. But at the same time, if you do like B movies, you'll probably get a kick out of it. But at the same time, you might be kind of disappointed in the sense that this actually could have been a good B movie, but instead it's a fun one, but at the same time it falls short of the mark of actually being good, sort of like what could have been. So as far as the movie goes, I'm gonna go ahead and give it 3 stars out of 5. I mean, for what it was, I thought it was a decent, fun movie. It could have been much better, though. Now, the main weakness of this, not so much the movie this time, but the bonus features, because this Blu-ray actually does have some bonus material. Unfortunately, most of it consists of Charles Band pitching products for full moon movies, or pitching products pertaining to his full moon movies. And I mean, like, the very first thing that you see when you start up the movie is one long pitch of him sitting in a studio, and he's got this voluptuous woman who's very attractive, don't get me wrong, doing kind of a striptease while he's talking about his plans for full moon features or full moon pictures, whatever it's called nowadays, while she's sort of doing, like, behind his back is and so definitely catches your attention. But at the same time, it's like, okay, this is like literally the first thing you see on the Blu-ray. I mean, it's not like you start it up and it goes to the menu and then you can start the movie. It's like you immediately are hit with this product pitch thing, and it's like, okay, can I skip it? I mean, thankfully you can skip it, but it's just, when that's the first thing that hits you, it's kind of like, well, you're like, wait, what? And then it just kind of keeps on going, and you're like, are you going to talk about Dollman at all? But no, it's just, he's pitching products that, to be perfectly frank, don't look good. I mean, I'm talking like this Blu-ray, I mean, it came out a couple of years ago, I believe, and he's talking about, his, upcoming movies, or, the movies that he's producing, that are, coming out soon, and he's touting them up like they're actually good movies. But the thing is, if from what you see of them in this, pitch, or what you hear of them in this pitch, it's like, dude, I mean, this might have been cool, say, like in the 90s, but I mean, yeah, you got to upgrade, man. I don't know. It's like you see it, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. But so thankfully, though, at the very least, you can fast forward through that, and then finally you get to the menu of the movie. But the one thing that, the one bonus feature that I found enjoyable on here was it was called a video zone segment, which is something that most, if not all, the full moon features movies had, like as far as the home video stuff goes. Like at the end of the movie, there's this little making of featurette, and it was really cool actually seeing that, because this video zone featurette, it was made at the time that Dollman was made. So it's like you're seeing the actors and the production, people at the time of the movie being made. Like you have Tim Thomerson and Jackie Earle Haley, sitting down and talking about the movie. And it's pretty cool seeing, them in their slightly younger days, and also, getting glimpses of, some of the crew, joking around and what have you. And I remember at one point, one of them was like, "I'm the Dollman, bitch!" So it's just, joking around with some of the people. And so it was nice to see the crew having fun, that kind of thing. And, what they were wanting to do with the movie. And apparently one of the things that they wanted to do was they were wanting Dollman to kind of be the start of a franchise. But as far as, on-screen movies go, Dollman was only in, I think, 2 other movies. Like he had a cameo at the end of a movie called Bad Channels, which I never saw, but then he was in Dollman versus Demonic Toys, and Demonic Toys was another full moon features movie, by the way. Sort of like it was kind of like it was in a similar vein as, say, Puppet Masters, that kind of thing. Not quite the same thing, but killer toys, puppets, you got the idea. But so Dollman versus Demonic Toys, that was the last time, he was, on screen as a character. But apparently, this isn't covered on the Blu-ray, but just, real quick before I forget, I found out, through looking online, there is actually a series of full moon related comic books. And I believe there was a series or mini-series called Dollman Kills the Full Moon Universe, kind of like Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe, but wherein Dollman actually interacts with, quote-unquote classic characters, from the Full Moon Universe, like Dr. Mordred, the Castle Freak, and of course, the Puppet Masters, or the puppets from the Puppet Master, that kind of thing. So I don't know if the mini-series is any good, but I am glad that, the character of Dollman is getting a chance to shine again. I mean, even if it's just in comic book form. But it would have been cool if they'd been able to, have a bit of a franchise with the Dollman character, albeit, say, if they had, fixed up some of the problems that they had in this movie going forward, But anyway, though, so it's, going back to the video zone segment, it was nice to see that. It's always cool, watching, the sort of making of featurette from back in the day, because you see how, you see people from a different point in time that were involved in the movie, and and then you see them now, and you see how things have changed. But I thought that was really nice to see. But that, in my opinion, as far as special features go, that was really the only worthwhile feature, because the other thing that was of quote-unquote significance was this bit where Charles Band and Tim Thomerson are sitting down together, and they're talking about, once again, they're, it's mostly product pitches, for Full Moon, right? And so it's kind of like, you could tell that the two of them, get along well and everything. I mean, they worked well together, especially on, Trancers, because Charles Band directed Trancers and Tim Thomerson starred in Trancers, so they definitely, have that history there. And also, Charles Band producing, some of the movies that Tim Thomerson was in, I mean, yeah, that you can tell that they're friends and what have you. But, seeing the two of them together, while you can tell that they're friends, they don't really talk a whole lot about Dollman specifically. Like, they mention it here and there, like Charles Band, I think, and maybe Tim Thomerson, like they do mention that, they had, that the original plan was to have a Dollman, based franchise within the movies, but because it didn't do well, it just didn't happen. But so you get that little bit, but then it goes back to pitching Full Moon products, and so it's like you're wanting to hear them talk about Dollman, maybe some retrospective stuff, years after the movie. I mean, that would have been nice, hear some inside stories and what have you, because once again, I'm mentioning transfers, I know, but you watch the Blu-ray on that movie, and the special features on that one are really cool. Like, you could tell that the people who put that together, and ironically, a lot of the people I think were involved, in putting this on Blu-ray as well, but they really skimped out on the actual good stuff when it came to the Dollman Blu-ray. Whereas with transfers, they did a good job with it. But it's like, I would have loved to have seen that level of care when it comes to, say, putting together special features, for, a Full Moon movie, that was applied to, say, transfers, carry over to Dollman. And transfers was an Empire movie, but Full Moon Features produced the transfer sequels, though. So that's why there's like a relation there. But anyway, though, but yeah, just when Tim Thomerson and Charles Band are talking together, I mean, it was really a letdown, because it would have been nice if they'd actually focused on talking about Dollman and swapping stories and what have you. I mean, because the two of them clearly get along well together, so it wouldn't be boring to hear them just chilling and talking. But instead, it's like, yeah, we're doing this series of product pitches for a substandard product, and poor Tim Thomerson, I mean, he's trying to keep a game face, but at the same time, you can tell he's just kind of like, what am I doing here? And whereas Charles Band, I mean, he's just seems to be, I mean, I don't know what he's like as a person, but he seems to be a little full of himself, or overestimate, the value of, Full Moon products, and that's just what it comes across to me in these little, product pitches, and so, and the other thing is that, this is a movie that's directed by this was a movie that was directed by Albert Pyun, but there's really nothing of him in the special features. I mean, you see a glimpse or two of him in the Video Zone segment, and they mentioned that he directed movies like The Sword and the Sorcerer, which is definitely, kind of a classic amongst, fans of B movies. And so it's like, it establishes that he was involved in making the movie in the Video Zone segment. It shows him, sort of directing scenes here and there. But in terms of, say, like, any sort of, current up-to-date stuff, he's not there. It's just Charles Band and Tim Thomerson talking, and only a little bit about the actual Dollman movie. And so it's almost like, if you didn't know any better, you'd think that Charles Band had directed Dollman, as opposed to Albert Pyun. But there's nothing from him, and I was kind of let down by that, because I mean, when I watched The Sword and the Sorcerer on Blu-ray, and I was watching the making of documentary on there, Albert Pyun definitely had some stories to tell, and I would have loved to have heard his, take on his experience on Dollman. But unfortunately, I mean, for whatever reason, they left him out on, the quote-unquote bonus features of this movie. And I think it's ironic, because, while Dollman is definitely the better movie, the bonus features suck. But then you take a movie like, say, Albert Pyun's other film, Cyborg, with Jean-Claude Van Damme, lousy movie, but by all accounts, some really good bonus features, and some of which actually involve Albert Pyun. And so I just thought that was kind of ironic in the sense that, you have what's a lousy movie gain, the royal treatment when it comes to bonus features, whereas you have a movie like Dollman, which in my opinion was the better movie, but you got shitty bonus features. Although the video zone segment was nice, I will admit that. So anyway, though, if you're a B-movie fan, definitely check Dollman out. It's, at the very least, you'll have some fun with it. But I mean, if you're not a B-movie fan, I mean, you might either want to skip this one or work your way to a point where you know what you're getting into, if that makes sense. Like, watch a few B movies that are kind of in this vein, and then once you get to here, you're like, okay, you know what you're getting into, if that makes sense. So, yeah, Dollman, 3 stars out of 5. It was a fun movie. Could have been better, but it was still fun. It just lousy bonus features though, so shame on you for the people who put the Blu-ray together. So anyway, yeah, that was my take on Dollman. You got any questions, comments, please feel free to drop a line below, let me know. And I would love to get some feedback from y'all. I'm always open to what y'all think about certain things, especially stuff I'm reviewing. Did y'all agree, disagree, or are there any stories y'all could tell about the movie, that kind of thing. But yeah, just drop a line. Let me know if you like what you see here. Please feel free to subscribe. Oh, and another thing, it would have been really cool if they had actually, had sort of, Ray Harryhausen stop motion quality work in this movie, but instead of, say, Dollman or Brick Bardo looking like this, he looked something like this. Okay, yes, I know this is a Predator action figure. Sean, thank you. Yeah, I'm giving you a shout out, buddy. You gave this to me. Thank you. But anyway, though, yeah, it would have been cool if they'd had something like this in the movie. Basically, like if the character of Brick Bardo or the aliens that were on his planet, his species, if they'd all looked something like this, but maybe if they'd all been done by way of stop motion, but maybe with some voice work, that kind of thing. So just imagine like Tim Thomerson's voice, coming from this guy or something like this guy. I mean, because it's like, you got the, movement and what have you. That would have been pretty cool. I mean, I would have liked to have seen that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's fun seeing Tim Thomerson, kicking ass in the movie, but just that would have, I think, made the movie more original, just in terms of, like conveying, an alien, life form on a different world, albeit through stop motion animation. But like, it just would have been, I think, a much better movie. But anyway, yeah, that's my last bit on it. But thanks for taking the time to check out my review. Y'all have a good night. Take care. Bye.